Hi there, my name is Marley and welcome to my channel. Happy October! Because it is October and the month of Halloween, spooky season, today I wanted to film a video where I recommended my top 20 favorite thriller books. Thrillers are one of my favorite genres to read, so I made a list of some 4, 4.5, and 5-star reads that I have read in the last couple years that I wanted to recommend today. Let's get into it since this is 20 book recommendations, so it might get pretty long. First up, we have The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. He's one of my favorite authors, and this is one of my favorite books from him. This is great for if you like a camp setting, which is a very popular setting for good reason. It's really fun. Just have a bunch of kind of random people in this one location for the summer. This in particular is following a main character named Emma who went to this camp when she was younger, and all of her friends or like bunkmates at this camp went missing back in the past. Now it's present day and she is returning to this camp as like a counselor or like an art teacher, I think it is, because she's now an artist who has always just been haunted by the disappearance of these girls when she was younger. So she's sort of investigating it, finding clues that sort of allude to the previous summer where those girls disappeared. And it's like a missing girls mystery, trying to figure out where these girls went, what happened to them all those years ago. As with all of Riley's books, I read this really quickly, like in just a couple of sittings. It's very addictive to read. The mystery is super interesting, good cliffhangers as always, so highly recommend this one. Then I have a new release I want to talk about, and that is Stay Awake by Megan Goldin. I actually got an arc of this, I think it was earlier this year, and I was obsessed with reading this book. I think it probably took me like, again, a day or two because I just could not put it down. It has a really cool concept of this woman wakes up one day or comes to consciousness. She has no memory of her past, or I think it's like the past year or a couple years or something, and she just has the statement "stay awake" written on her. And I think she's holding a murder weapon, like a bloody knife or something like that. And so it's like a memory loss story where she has no idea what has just happened to her in the last couple of years. She doesn't know why she was holding a murder weapon or why the word "stay awake" is written on her arm. Why it's written on her arm is because whenever she falls asleep, her memory gets wiped again and she has to start all over. So I really like that concept. I think it was so fun to read about. I was so engaged in this mystery. I do feel like the ending fell a little bit flat for me. I wish the big twist could have been something cooler, but I just think the whole ride, whole journey of the book was just so fun that I still would highly recommend it. Next up is another Riley Sager. Sorry if that gets repetitive, but it's Lock Every Door. This is probably his most popular book, and again, it's one of my favorites. So it's about this girl, sorry I forget her name, and she's down on her luck, not doing well money-wise or relationship-wise or anything like that. So she ends up getting this job apartment sitting this room in this very prestigious New York apartment building, but it's weird because there's a lot of rules, like she's not allowed to sleep over anywhere else. She's not allowed to have guests over, not allowed to take pictures in the apartment, like all these weird rules. But they're offering her, I forget how much now, but I think they're paying her like $5,000 a month or like something. Like they're paying her a lot of money, and so she takes them up on this and then finds out that there have been some other people in the apartment building who have been going missing. And so it's a really creepy book. As always, I just always love Riley Sager's writing where you're like, is this like a paranormal thing going on in this like haunted hotel, or is it something real life based going on here? And I really liked the main character in this. Yeah, just again would really recommend. Then we have maybe a more controversial pick, and that is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid. I want to say this is maybe one of the first thrillers I read. I actually read it with my boyfriend and we read it in like one day. Again, all of these thrillers, if I read a thriller in like a day, you know it's good, you know I couldn't put it down. This is also pretty short too, so if you want like a shorter book, it's very like stream of consciousness, so you probably won't want to put it down. If you for some reason have not heard of this, it's a pretty cool book. We're following a main character who's on like a kind of road trip with her partner, her boyfriend. They're driving to visit his family for the weekend, and she's just thinking all of these sort of depressing thoughts about how she wants to end things with him, break up with him, and then it just gets really weird. I almost don't even know how to describe it, but it's definitely more of like a psychological thriller where you're constantly trying to figure out what is going on, like what are the hidden deep messages. Probably not a book for everyone, but if that's something that you want to read, I really recommend this. I think it was a really unique book. I also want to recommend Emma in the Night by Wendy Walker. This is the only book by Wendy that I have read, but I really need to read more of hers because I just remember loving this one. This is about two sisters who go missing. I believe we're seeing flashbacks to like before they go missing, and then present day when one of the girls is found. She is being like interviewed and investigated by the police about her experience with being kidnapped, which is her story that the two of them were kidnapped and then she was able to escape, and I believe she says that her sister has passed away. So they're investigating that disappearance and her reappearance, but it seems like there's some sketchy things going on with her story, some things she's not being totally honest about, and it's also kind of like a psychological story regarding this family, as there's a lot of stuff that went on with this family before the disappearance. I just remember being really impressed with the twist. I think reading sister stories is always really engaging for me. This is one I don't hear talked about a lot. I guess it's sort of underrated, but I definitely would recommend it. Next up is An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena. I would honestly probably recommend all of her books, but this is the only one I put on this list because I think it is my favorite of the ones I've read of her so far. It just has so many good tropes and I just think it's done so well. But this is about a group of people who get stranded at this inn or like this hotel, and there's a snowstorm and then people start dying. Like it's so fun. It's like the better version of One by One by Ruth Ware. Like it just does everything right. I can't remember all the details anymore, again, because I think I read this in one day, one sitting, but I just remember it was so good. And I think I rated it 4.5. I want to say it was just because I had guessed who the killer was or something. Shari Lapena's books are always so good. So yeah, definitely check her out if you have not, especially this one. Now, this is definitely an unpopular opinion, but I want to recommend The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. But with a disclaimer of I'm kind of in the minority on the opinion of this. Not that many people have been enjoying it, but I gave it 5 stars. Again, I think you either maybe really connect with his writing or you don't, because I just connect with it every single book. I think it's so easy to read. I feel like he always gives like quite a bit of interesting red herrings for you to be theorizing throughout of what you think is going on. And as I mentioned before, there's always that question of whether it's paranormal or not. And I just think he does some interesting, crazy, wild things in this book that are very polarizing, but I personally enjoyed them because I was just not expecting the places that it went. So if you want a book like that, that's just kind of out there, not your typical thriller, I would recommend this one. I didn't even say what it's about, but it is about this woman who's gone through some trauma, dealing with some grief, and so she's staying at this house on the lake that is in her family, and she starts observing her neighbors, including a couple that lives across from her. She ends up befriending the wife and confiding in her, and then one day the wife goes missing, and so because they are friends, she takes it upon herself to try to figure out what happened to this woman. She suspects it's the husband, of course. She's also a very bad alcoholic, so you're also dealing with that. I know that bothered a lot of people, but if you don't mind reading from like alcoholics or like unreliable narrators, then check this out. Now we have a more recent read of mine, and that is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I definitely need to get to more of her books because they sound so good. People really recommend her. I mention her a lot as like a queen of twists. This is the only one I've read so far, and it was so fun. Again, read it in one day. A bit of a theme here. But this is about a couple who is going on a weekend getaway to help their marriage because it's a little rocky right now. And as soon as they get to this inn, it's creepy, it's abandoned. I think they won it. They won their stay there in a very weird way. So there's a lot of mystery surrounding this inn or cabin or whatever it is. We're also seeing letters that the wife wrote to the husband throughout their marriage, and it's kind of giving you hints as to like the things that have gone on between them. And it just kind of seems like they maybe are planning to kill each other or like they kind of want to kill each other. So it's very fast paced. It goes in really crazy directions. I think that's the one kind of thing I've heard people say against it, is that the twists are like so crazy. But if you don't mind a book that's so crazy, definitely read this. Another great thriller is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Hands down my favorite book from her, even though again I would recommend her overall as an author, but I think this is definitely her best work. It is based on, I think the original is called The Turn of the Screw or something. It's been like adapted a bunch, but this is following a nanny who takes over watching the kids for this family. The house is very creepy. It's like a smart house, like very technologically advanced. But then it starts acting up and like weird things start happening, like the lights get turned off or doors get locked or like whatever. These kids are also acting suspicious, so there's that going on. And then there's also some mystery surrounding this main character's past. We are also getting flash forwards or whatever to the future where we see that she is in jail. So it's all leading up to that of like what leads to her being in jail. It has a lot of spooky stuff again, where is it paranormal or not, and it was just a really enjoyable book, so definitely get to this one. Looks like we have another kind of mixed opinion in here, and that is The Maidens by Michaelides. A lot of people did not like this one, but again, here I am saying that I would recommend it. It is about a woman who is I think she's like a group psychologist or group therapist, and her niece calls her one day saying that, you know, one of her friends or like classmates or whatever was murdered at her school. And so she goes over to like comfort her niece. And while there, she decides to start investigating this murder of this girl. She seems to think it is a professor that's on campus. There's some dark academia vibes there. And then I believe some other girls start dying as well. So it's like a serial killer thing. Our main character's trying to figure it out, use her therapist skills to figure it out. I just found this, again, very fast-paced, easy to read, really short chapters. Whenever that's the case, I just read it so quickly. Also did not see the twist coming. It definitely is disturbing. But yeah, I was shocked by it. I just had a good time reading it. So I would still recommend this one. Another favorite book that I have read is The Push by Audrain. I'm putting it as a thriller, but it's not super thrilling. It's more like mysterious and like tense drama. But I kind of still categorize it as a thriller though. But this is about a woman who gets married to this man, they start having kids, and she like hates one of her kids and suspects that their kid is evil based on a bunch of things that we, you know, witness throughout the book. But of course her husband doesn't believe her, no one believes her, and we're also seeing flashbacks of like generational trauma that her family has gone through. Like we're seeing her mom's life, her grandma's life. It just really dives into like motherhood and all those sorts of topics, and it was just very tense, again, very easy to get through, had a plot twist at the end. I just really enjoyed it. Then we have Verity by Colleen Hoover. This is actually like a thriller romance book. I read it a while ago. I actually read it before all the girlies got a hold of it on TikTok and everything, but I remember just being blown away by this book. I think to this day I would still consider it my favorite Colleen Hoover book because it just does so much. Also very disturbing, but the ending twist is like everything I would ever want from a thriller. This is about an author who is not very successful, but then she gets approached to become the ghost author for this very popular author named Verity, who writes, I think, just like murder mysteries. But she recently had this accident where she is no longer conscious. She's in a sort of coma state, so she cannot finish the rest of her series. So this author decides she'll continue the series for her, but in order to do that, she has to go be in Verity's office with all of her notes, which of course is at her house. So she's living with Verity's husband, kid, and Verity, who is there in this sort of unconscious state. Very creepy because it kind of begs the question of whether she really is conscious or not, and it's very creepy. I remember being so creeped out when I read it. She also finds this manuscript when she's in Verity's office that makes it seem like Verity was an evil person. So just fantastic, just really fun. I probably should reread this because it was so long ago, but everyone hypes it up and it's for a reason. I think if you are against reading Colleen Hoover, like I know a lot of people are, this should be the one that you check out. Next up, I want to recommend In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. Definitely one of my favorite thrillers. I love all the sort of themes that were in this book. I remember having good discussions about it in my book club when we read it, but this is about a friend group in college. So we're seeing when they were back in college and these flashbacks about how their friendships all formed. But then one of the girls in their group got murdered, and then we're seeing present day a bunch of years later when most of them have moved on. They end up all coming back for this college reunion. This one character, I think it's the murdered girl's brother, he sort of brings everyone together and is like, I know one of you killed her and didn't take the blame for it. So then everything just comes back up to the surface, and it's a murder mystery trying to figure out which of these friends killed this girl, because of course everyone has motives and all that kind of stuff. And I just think it was really well done. All of the relationships were really interesting, especially our main character. Everyone is very flawed, but you could also understand them. Just one of those types of things. Good twist at the end. Very good. Another great book is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. This is one that maybe wouldn't be for everyone, but I really loved it and I would highly recommend it. It has a really cool concept, but it is a little bit like a thriller sci-fi, just so you're aware of that. We're seeing this guy and he basically is waking up in a different person's body every day, kind of that Groundhog Day thing. He is given the task to figure out who is killing Evelyn Hardcastle, because at the end of every day, she is being murdered. What's cool about it is he's not just living in the one person's body, he's changing the body that he's in each day, so he's able to learn about different things each day, different clues, where different people were throughout that same day. And then there's also a competition where someone else is trying to figure out the mystery too. Very cool. I remember it was a little bit hard for me to wrap my head around when I started it, and whenever that's the case, it can be a little boring and hard to get through, but I would say push through because it was really enjoyable and a really cool concept. Then we have my queen, Lisa Jewell, with The Night She Disappeared. I think this might be the only book of hers that I put on this list, but again, she's an author. I would kind of just recommend her whole backlist. This was a thriller that I would just say had everything in it, like not just the thrills, but also the like emotional stuff if you want like a more well-rounded thriller, I guess. Like I do remember actually crying in this book. So it is about this young couple who actually have a kid, and they end up going missing one day, murdered or missing. And so we're following the mother of the girl who, you know, is tasked with taking care of their son and obviously is trying to find her daughter, find out what happened to her. We're also seeing the point of view of this other kind of random lady that's not really involved in the case, but she moves into town and she's the one that sort of starts investigating this murder when she sees in like her yard, there's this clue. I forget what it was now. I think it's something that's buried, and she digs it up and it's like some clue of the murder. Yeah. Again, this went some interesting places. It was very good, very addicting to read, and also focused on like mother-daughter relationships, romantic relationships, like other cool stuff like that. So yeah, really good. Hopefully this isn't too long, sorry. Next we have The One by John Mars. This is another like thriller sci-fi. If you have not heard about it, it is about all of these different people in this world where there is this, I think it's an app or it's like a DNA test where your blood gets tested and then you're given your one true love, your match, the person you are most compatible with in the world. And so we're following all these different cases of different matches, and all of them have these sort of weird, like ominous things going on. Like what's one of them? Like one of the most interesting ones is that there's a killer that gets matched with a detective, and so he's kind of trying to get away with murders while like dating her. There's a bunch of weird little matches like that, and it goes in some crazy thrillery places. So I would highly recommend this one. There's so many characters, you're bound to be entertained. I think the chapters are like very short and quick. It's great. I would also want to recommend Pretty Girls by Karin Slaughter. Definitely one of my favorite thrillers that I have read. It's about these two sisters who are estranged, but when the one girl's husband gets murdered in this very terrible way, they end up reconnecting and like investigating into what happened with the one girl's husband. It seems like he was wrapped up in some really messed up stuff. As background, they actually did have a third sister back in the day who was murdered and kidnapped or something. A very disturbing book, but very, very good. So many twists and turns and action, and there's the sisterly bond like I mentioned before, which is always enjoyable. But yeah, definitely like content warnings for sexual assault, assault against women, all that kind of stuff. That's pretty typical in Karin Slaughter's books, but her books are just so good. Like some of the best thrillers. I would recommend her other books as well, like Pieces of Her and The Good Daughter, but I do believe this is her best one. Now, not your typical thriller, different from the ones I've been talking about, but I also want to recommend Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. His books are thrillery, I don't know how else you would describe them, action, historical. something like that. His Robert Langdon series is really, really great. I really enjoy them. Basically, he is this symbologist professor who always just gets wrapped up in some sort of weird mystery crime that's going on, and he always has like 24 hours to save the day, figure out the codes, defeat the terrorists, or whatever's going on. And I just find them so good because, yeah, you're always trying to figure out riddles or codes, and as I said, it's always like within 24 hours, so it's very fast paced. People don't talk about these books that much on BookTube, but they were some of the books that got me into reading when I was younger. I even read them when I was in elementary school, so don't be intimidated by them and all of the words and all of these sort of historical art references. It's worth it. They're really good. Next up is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is the first book I read from him because it's his first book, and I was blown away by it. It was one of the first thrillers I ever read, so maybe it's a case where I should reread it just to confirm, but I don't think it's one that would have that same impact if you read it again, because the twist was just so mind-blowing to me at the time. It just would not have that same effect again. But this is about a man who is a psychologist of some sort, and he ends up taking on this case of this woman who does not speak. She killed her husband a while ago and then just stopped speaking, like didn't even defend herself in court or anything. So it's this case of like trying to figure out why she did that and why she no longer speaks. And then we're also diving into his past a little. He also has like mental health issues and issues with his marriage and blah, blah, blah. Really great book. Just that's all you should know going in. I think the twist is really worth it. I hope it doesn't get spoiled for you. I hope you don't figure it out, because I think figuring it out as it's unraveling was really fun. And the last book, the book that really made me love thrillers, was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, the King. This is really fun. It's like a haunted house kind of story, but again, as I've said a million times, you don't know if it really is paranormal or not throughout. It's about the main character, Maggie, whose I think dad has just recently passed away, and she finds out he had kept this house that they had lived in when she was younger, but they had moved out of it because apparently some creepy things were going on, like haunted things. So she thought that he had sold it, but he actually kept it. So she goes over to like try and sell it, fix it up, and when she's there, some really creepy things are happening again, just like they did when she was younger. The reason she can kind of remember what happened when she was younger is that the dad actually published a book about their experiences when they were there and all these creepy things. So you're seeing those chapters from the book where these things happen to them, and then you're seeing them happen to her in real time as well. So very intriguing. I remember it had like multiple plot twists, and I guessed some of them. I didn't guess other ones, which I always like because then you feel a little satisfied, but you're still shocked. Just such a great thriller. It just really spooked me out at the time. I really enjoyed it. So that's all my thriller book recommendations. I should have mentioned it's only adult thrillers, not YA, which I also really love. But thanks so much for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, leave me a comment of a thriller recommendation you have for me, maybe based on my taste, and subscribe if you have not already for more Halloween content this month. Thanks so much. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.